If intellectual pursuits sometimes feel like climbing a mountain, then today we're maybe setting up at Base Camp 3. That sounds about right. We're taking a deep dive into Jacques Lacan's Écrit. It's dense, it's provocative, definitely monumental. And it really rewrites Floyd, focusing on how language shapes the unconscious.
It's famously tough going. I mean, if you've ever tried to read Lacan, the style itself kind of pushes back against easy understanding. So our mission today is, I think, pretty crucial. We're not aiming to just, summarize the whole thing. That's impossible. You want to cut through some of that complexity, try and map out the core concepts. He uses the operational ideas for understanding the psyche, the signifier.
Extracting the essentials. Because he wasn't just riffing on Freud, was he? He was really calling for like a whole new self-awareness in psychology.
Absolutely. A theoretical rigor based on language.
So to start, we probably need his basic framework, the way he organizes everything, really. These three registers, the imaginary, the symbolic, and the real. Let's try and unpack that map.
Yeah, the three registers. Think of them as maybe like overlapping dimensions or filters through which we experience things.
Okay, let's start with the one that maybe sounds the simplest. The imaginary, right?
The imaginary. It's essentially the dimension of images, visuals.
So anything I see or picture,
Pretty much your visual life. Things you actually perceive, things you remember seeing, unconscious images, fantasies. It's where identification happens.
identification, like seeing yourself.
Exactly. Seeing yourself in a mirror, recognizing yourself in a photo, even identifying with characters or, idealized images online, that's all happening. The imaginary, it's about that visual form, the gestalt.
Okay, so scrolling Instagram, seeing those polished images, that's pure imaginary territory. Identifying with that surface.
That's a perfect example. It's about surfer reflections, the whole relationship we have with how things look. But that relationship gets complicated fast because we don't just look, we also live in a world of rules and structures.
And that leads us to the symbolic. This feels like the big one. It is in many ways. The symbolic is the register of language, of discourse, of law, culture, the whole social contract, really.
The structure itself.
Yes, the network of signifiers, words, rules, customs, institutions, everything that gives things meaning within a shared system. For Lacan, psychoanalysis primarily happens here through speech. The symbolic function assigns meaning. It positions you in the world.
Okay, so we've got the image imaginary and the word or the law symbolic. Then there's the third one, the real. Now this sounds like it should mean, objective reality. But you warned me it doesn't.
It absolutely does not. That's a common trip up. The real is defined by what it isn't. It's what is neither symbolic nor imaginary.
What's left?
It's the raw stuff, the kernel of existence that resists being captured by language or image. Think maybe the organism itself, raw biological need before its articulated trauma in its unspeakable aspect. It's whatever fundamentally resists symbolization.
It's outside the system.
Totally outside. It's foreclosed from the analytic experience because analysis works with language. With the symbolic, you can only kind of point to it. Suppose it like an algebraic X. It's the limit.
So if I try to talk about a traumatic event, the story I tell is symbolic. But the raw, indigestible core of it, the part that words just can't touch, that's the real.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it. And crucially, don't confuse it with reality. Because for us, as desiring subjects, our everyday reality is completely saturated with the symbolic. In the imaginary, it's deeply phantasmatic, shaped by language and images. The real is more like the irreducible thing that disrupts that reality.
That makes more sense. It's the system's blind spot. Okay, let's circle back to the imaginary for a second, to how we get our sense of self. The famous mirror stage Lacan talks about a baby, right? Still uncoordinated.
Yes, the infant stage, motor incapacity, a feeling of fragmentation. But then it sees its reflection in a mirror.
I mean, it gets excited jubilantly, assumes the image. He says,
Right. And that moment is huge because that reflection offers a sense of wholeness, of unity that the baby's actual physical experience lacks. This identification establishes the ideal I.
The perfect version.
It's an exhilarating moment of anticipating mastery, but it has really radical consequences for how the self, the ego, gets formed.
Right? Because this is where the fictional self idea comes in.
Precisely that image in the mirror, that ideal I, sets the ego, the moi, off on a fictional trajectory. The ego is formed as that idealized unity. It's a way to kind of paper over the original distress, the lack of coordination. It's an image of coherence.
But wait, if my ego, my core sense of me, is based on identifying with an external idealized image before I can even properly control my own body, doesn't that mean my self-concept is fundamentally based on, well, getting it wrong? A misrecognition.
That is exactly the crucial point. The ego is structured by what Lacan calls mechaniscence.
Mechaniscence. Break that down.
It means failure to recognize, or maybe misconstruction, a fundamental misknowing. Lacan argues that our self-knowledge connaissance is tangled up with this primary misconstruction from the very beginning.
Wow.
The ego is what we experience as us, our consciousness. But because its foundation is this external, idealized image, it remains sort of opaque to itself. It's inherently ambiguous. Sometimes self-satisfied, sometimes acting in bad faith, always built on that initial fiction.
So the very thing we used to understand ourselves is inherently misleading. It's built on a beautiful lie almost.
You can put it that way. It's a structural necessity, but it means self-knowledge is never straightforward.
No wonder analysis is challenging, and this inherent lack, this discordance, that must be part of what drives us, right? Leading us to need, demand, and desire.
Absolutely. That initial split, that reliance on the image sets the stage. But it's when language, the symbolic, enters the picture that things get really interesting with our drives. How does a simple biological need get transformed into this constant, often unsatisfiable longing?
Language is the culprit.
Language is the mechanism. It creates the rift.
Okay, let's start simple. Need besoin.
Need is pretty straightforward. It's biological. Hunger needs food, thirst needs water. Specific object satisfies it. Pure biology,
Got it. But humans don't just have needs.
right? We have to express them. We ask. And the moment you ask, the need gets articulated through language and it becomes demand.
Demand, demand. So any speech is a demand?
Essentially, yes. All speech is addressed to the other with a capital O.
The other. Not just another person.
Initially, maybe the mother or caretaker. But ultimately, the other represents the entire symbolic order, language, culture, the social field itself, the source of the signifier.
Okay, so the baby cries demanding milk.
It's demanding satisfaction of the need, yes, but it's doing more because the satisfaction comes from the other. It gets interpreted as more than just food. It's treated as a response to an appeal, maybe a sign of love, a proof of recognition.
So there's always something more being asked for than just the object.
Always. There's a fundamental mismatch, a non-add equation between the raw need and the demand that carries it through language.
The demand is for milk and for love or recognition. The milk might arrive satisfying the need, but that call for recognition, it sort of lingers, doesn't it? Because language can never fully capture or guarantee it.
Precisely. And it's in that gap, that leftover bit, the difference between the need and the demand. That's where desire is born. Desire. Desire is the remainder.
Exactly. Desire is the perpetual effect of this symbolic process. It's what's left over when you subtract the biological need from the articulated demand. It's singular. It's inherently eccentric, meaning off-center, and it's fundamentally insatiable.
It's not just a bigger appetite.
Not at all. It's not about the object itself. The crucial insight here is that our desire finds its meaning in the desire of the other.
Meaning we want what the other wants, or we want the other to want us.
Both in a way. But fundamentally, the first object of desire is to be recognized by the other, to have a place in the other's desire.
So if I want that fancy car,
You don't just want the machine. You want what that car signifies within the symbolic order, the recognition it potentially grants you in the eyes of the other. It's about the signifier, not the thing.
that makes immediate sense of so much consumerism status. It's all about chasing that recognition from the other. It's never just about the product.
Okay, this link between language lag and desire leads us right into the unconscious. Freud called it the other scene.
I'm under Schrapplatz. Yeah,
But Lacan's big move was saying the unconscious is structured like a language. What does that actually mean for how it works?
it means the unconscious doesn't follow the rules of conscious thought, logic, or narrative. It operates according to the logic of the signifier itself. It uses rhetorical devices, linguistic mechanisms.
So the unconscious is talking, but it's speaking in code or poetry.
Poetry and puns is a great way to think about it. Lacan defines the unconscious as that part of concrete trans-individual discourse, meaning language that exists between people that isn't available to the subjects. Conscious control. It speaks through us.
In dreams, slips of the tongue, symptoms. Exactly. And he maps the primary mechanisms onto Freud's own findings: condensation and displacement.
Okay, so metaphor is condensation for dictum.
Yes, metaphor works by substitution. One signifier stands in for another, creating a new meaning. Lacan loved that the German word for condensation for dictum also contains dictum, which means poetry.
Condensation is poetic.
It really is. And the symptom for Lacan is a metaphor. Flesh or bodily function is used as a signifying element.
So instead of consciously processing this pressure is unbearable, the unconscious substitutes and creates a metaphor. I have a crushing headache.
Precisely. The headache is the metaphor condensing a whole knot of meaning into a bodily signifier.
That's powerful. Okay, and the other one, metonymy, that maps to displacement for Shibung.
Right? Metonymy works through combination, contiguity, association. It's a sideways shift of meaning along a chain of signifiers. Like in a dream, yeah, where you might shift from thinking about your boss to maybe a king to a tall building. There's a connection, maybe power or authority, but the meaning keeps getting displaced from one signifier to the next. It allows desire to circulate, to keep moving, often avoiding the central lack it's organized around.
So metaphor creates dense knots of meaning through substitution, while metonymy creates movement and evasion along a chain of associations.
That's a very good way to summarize it. Those are the basic grammatical rules, if you like, of the unconscious language, constantly using these processes to articulate desire and lack, often right under the radar of our conscious ego.
Okay, we've built this picture. The subject is kind of constituted by language, by the signifier. The ego is imaginary fiction. Desire is driven by symbolic lack. But for the symbolic order, for language and law to hold together, it needs some kind of ultimate anchor, right?
It does. And that brings us to probably one of the most abstract but crucial concepts. The name of the father, Eia, nom du père, sounds important. Bi. It's absolutely central. And again, crucially, it's not about the actual biological dad.
Or even the image of the father we have.
No, it's the key signifier that underpins the entire symbolic function. It represents the function of the law itself. It links the figure of the father symbolically to the principle of prohibition, structure, the rules that govern society, and desire.
The know that structures everything.
In a sense, yes. It's the symbolic law that allows society to function, that pulls the child out of the initial, potentially all-consuming relationship with the mother, the imaginary diet, and inserts them into the wider symbolic order. Lacan links it to Freud's idea of the dead father from Totem and Taboo.
The law that remains even after the person is gone.
Exactly. The symbolic function endures. It guarantees the persistence of this structure beyond individuals.
Why is understanding this abstract signifier so critical for understanding something like psycho?
Because for Lacan, psychosis stems from a fundamental problem with this very signifier. It's caused by the foreclosure of nom du père, of the name of the Father.
Foreclosure. Like it wasn't just repressed, it was rejected, never installed.
That's the idea. Vermorphin means a throwing out, a repudiation. This fundamental signifier, the anchor of the law, never found its proper place in the subject's symbolic universe, in the field of the other.
And if that anchor isn't there,
It leaves a gaping hole in the signify, in the very structure of meaning and reality for the subject. The fundamental coordinates of the symbolic order are missing or broken.
so the shared rules, the common language of reality, breaks down.
Exactly. And this defect, this hole, triggers what Lacan described as a cascade of reshapings of the signifier. The subject is desperately trying to patch over this hole to create some kind of stable reality, often resulting in delusions or hallucinations.
Which are attempts to rebuild a world, but without that foundational piece of the law.
Precisely. It's an attempt at stabilization, but on fundamentally different non-symbolic grounds. It frames madness not as a biological deficit necessarily, but as a catastrophe within the structure of language itself.
Wow. Okay, pulling back then, looking at the whole structure, the imaginary ego, the symbolic law-driving desire, the unconscious speaking its own language. The big takeaway seems to be we are fundamentally shaped, even determined by language. The signifier comes first.
That's the radical core of it, yes. It forces us as subjects to confront our own decenteredness. We're not the masters of our own meaning. We are spoken by the structures we inhabit, by the other.
So the goal of analysis isn't just self-discovery in the usual sense.
No, it's more about helping the subject come to terms with this structure, to find and assume their place within this fractured signifier-driven reality, to recognize how their desire is caught up in the symbolic.
In that process, that goal you mentioned, Lacan often used a specific phrase from Freud to capture it. A final thought for us to grapple with.
Yes, it's Freud's famous statement about the aim of analysis was old, wo es war, soll ich werden. Usually translated as, where it was, there shall ego be.
Right, strengthening the ego.
But Lacan reads it through his own lens, emphasizing the ease, the if, the unconscious, and the subject's position. He translates it more like, I must come to the place where that was.
I must confront the id, the unconscious determination, the place of the other in me.
Exactly. You have to assume that eccentricity for the con. This phrase points towards the limit of the subject's journey through the symbolic, which is ultimately figured as death.
Not literally dying, no.
Not biological death, but death. As he quotes Heidegger here, that possibility which is one's own most unconditional, unsupersedable, certain, and as such, indeterminable. It's about confronting the ultimate limit imposed by the signifier, the point where the subject must fully assume their finitude within the symbolic order.
So the final challenge, maybe for you listening, is to really sit with that idea. The self you feel yourself to be is in a way a necessary fiction created by the language you inhabit. The question then becomes, respond from within that structure.
That's the work right there.